Welcome into another episode of the News4JAGs podcast. Jamal St here alongside Justin Barney. Justin, it is officially
game week, my friend. Yeah. Game week. We've been waiting all season long, traipsing through the crazy, relentless days of training camp to get to this week. It is here.
Yeah.
It is here.
It has been a grind to get through training camp, not just for the team. It is a grind on us, too. I'm not going to lie to you. I love training camp. One of my favorite times of year, but it is a grind. Glad it's over. Getting to this game week kind of schedule. We can talk about games that matter. I mean, look, preseason's fun and all. You talk about the long shots to make the roster, but there's something different when the games matter.
Exactly. I mean, preseason, you know what you're looking for. You're trying to scratch to pick off the plays of the starters, run maybe 11, 12 snaps a game. And so it's something completely different you're looking for. Game week, you get into that rotation. You know the days off of the team. You know your days off instead of working 7 days in training camp.
Yeah.
It is just a different beast. And it's just excitement. It's the same in college football where week one gets there. High school football, same things to set excitement. NFL, to me, is just different. I love the first week in NFL.
I do, too. So the Jaguars have a tough test week one this year against the Miami Dolphins. This is a tough way to start things off. Before we talk about the Dolphins too much, and we might decide to do that in a later episode of the podcast later on this week, get into the matchup a little bit more. But let's talk about the Jaguars as a whole. Last year was a slide to the finish. I mean, there's no way around it. How important is it to start this year with a win after the way last season ended?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that you do. I mean, you want to win every game, but I think to show the team itself, I talked to Jaguars players throughout camp. I mean, Andre Cisco said it. He's like, we left a bad taste in people's mouths last year. We have a lot to prove to ourselves and to our fans, and I think a lot of players share that vibe. You know, if it starts out great last year, 8-3, great start, feeling like you're buzzing towards a playoff berth, and then just boom. So if you come out and you finish or you start on the same kind of page that you finished on last year, I think there's going to be questions. I think there's going to be questions on who's calling plays. Is Doug too loyal to press? Are we going to change? How are we going to prevent this year from starting out like last year finished? And I think it's massive to get out on that right foot.
I think you nailed it. If for some reason week one doesn't go the way the Jaguars hope that it will, there are going to be questions, and they're going to come quickly because of how last season ended. And if you wake up and you're 0-2, it's not going to be like last season where it was 0-2 and, oh, you know what, we'll be fine. They may say that publicly, but there's going to be that feeling of, oh, no, here we go again. We're still stunk in this funk. And how do we get out of it?
It's like 2022. It ended so positively. And then they carried that momentum over to last year, 8-3. I mean, you felt like, hey, man, this team has really turned a corner. The franchise is on the ascent. And then, boom, you flatline, you finish like you did. So I do think there's questions. I think there's questions about Trevor. Can he eliminate these turnovers? Can he become that true franchise quarterback? He's got the contract now. He's not a cheap player anymore, not on that rookie deal. Can he take that next step? If Trevor comes out and has a terrible game against Miami, Tua outplays him, I think there's going to be questions on if is Trevor the guy, and you're married to him until the end of this decade, unfortunately or fortunately for the Jags. But I do think it's imperative that Jacksonville gets out on the right foot, or you're going to have those same questions that have troubled and plagued this franchise for years.
Comparing Trevor Lawrence to Tua Tagovailoa is not fair, Justin. If Tua woke up tomorrow with Trevor Lawrence's supporting cast, he would retire. Look, they've got some talent around Trevor, don't get me wrong, but it ain't Tyreek Hill, it ain't Jalen Waddle, it ain't Devon Achane, I mean, it's just not.
It's not.
It's just not the same. I mean, Tyreek Hill is a guy who is going #1 overall in fantasy football drafts for good reason because he is that dynamic, was in the MVP conversation at times, which doesn't happen for wide receivers. Christian Kirk's good.
Yeah. You remember the tank for Tua? Remember the tank for Tua?
I do remember those things.
I do.
And that was overstated.
I do think at this point in his career, Tua is a better player than Trevor. Trevor's just not shown it consistently enough.
Justin.
He may.
Justin, who is Tyreek Hill? Who is Tyreek Hill in Jacksonville?
That's part of.
He's throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
That's true. Marvin Jones Jr., Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. I know, that's true. There is not a comparison in the supporting cast. But that's part of the equation. I mean, people look at the quarterbacks, and in every metric you look at, Tua is ahead of Trevor. I mean, Trevor is in that middle of the league in terms of where he's at. And you're the #1 pick in the draft. I don't care your supporting cast. I mean, yeah, we know the supporting cast. We see these guys on a regular basis. Trevor's never had a really great supporting cast. This is his best collection of guys around there. Offensive line is still, I mean, it's still meh. I mean, does Christian Kirk, does Evan Ingram, does Zay Jones, does Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis, do those guys really strike fear into the hearts of opposing defenses? They don't. Does Tyreek Hill? Yes, he does. Yeah. So I get that argument, but your number one pick in the draft, generational prospect, you're still going to be judged on, I don't care what your supporting cast is. You're still going to be judged harshly, fairly or unfairly, and right now, Tua has been a better player than Trevor.
Well, we'll see what happens to Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe he's the Tyreek Hill for the Jaguars one day. Those are lofty expectations and a long way off for a rookie to get there. But this is his first game, going to be his first game. I'm the fantasy football guy. As of right now, I have one more draft to go.
Okay.
One more fantasy football league draft that's actually tonight. I have not gotten a single Brian Thomas Jr. pick yet.
Wow.
I have Evan Ingram. I have Gabe Davis in a couple of places, but I think I have Trevor Lawrence in one league. But Brian Thomas Jr., for whatever reason, he's going a little too high for my blood.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe in a keeper league?
Yeah, 100%. If it's a keeper or a dynasty league, I would go and get BTJ. I know how this offense works, and I just don't think there's going to be any single guy that they're going to force the ball to and funnel it his way. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. could be fantastic. He could 100% close in on 1,000 yards this year, maybe be in that vicinity. I just don't know if I feel good enough.
I'm with you, man. Yeah. I'm with you. I don't know how many fantasy leagues I've been in over the years, local fantasy leagues. People have ties to Jaguars, and you see these people taking a Jaguar early in the draft, and you're like, oh, that's not a good decision. No. It's going back years and years and years. I mean, maybe in the Brunell, Jimmy, Fred Taylor era, you would take those guys.
Jimmy Smith.
But not anytime recently.
If you're a fantasy football player and you want your Jaguars, here are the two guys that I would recommend. Travis Etienne.
Yep.
I 100% recommend him. He is going to have the lion's share of the workload until he gets banged up. They'll try and get Tank going, but this is his backfield. Evan Ingram. I mean, tight end is a barren wasteland anyway, and you at the very least know he is in the top 3 in a pecking order, and him and Trevor have that bond together. He is going to get his. You just hope he doesn't go into the touchdown drought that he had a year ago.
Only 4 touchdowns last year, and the knock on Evan, fantasy-wise, yeah, he's got yardage. He just doesn't produce trips the end zone.
Right.
And that's been the knock on Evan. When you look at Evan in the national kind of talk about him, yeah, he's a top 10 tight end, but he just doesn't provide a lot of yardage after the catch. He catches a lot of balls, but he's not getting into that 1,000-yard range. He's not 10 times into the end zone. And I would just be hesitant because we saw what last year was offensively. I wish you could have your fantasy draft after the season starts, see how this offensive line kind of held up. But Trevor, the last time we saw Trevor, he was just a shell to me of the player we had seen because he was beaten up, he was banged up terribly. He didn't trust his offensive linemen, and you got guys at receiver who are banged up as well too. So to me, I think it's very fair and valid for these national publications and stuff to have Trevor in kind of that middle of the road in terms of in the league. And you and I have kind of always said if Trevor can get into that 10-11 range, that's good, and then step up from there. And he's not. He was there to me in 2022. Yeah. Regressed. And to me, even last year, he wasn't. It didn't feel comfortable.
No, it never quite got there. And not knocking Trevor Lawrence in the fantasy leagues. I was telling our new sports producer, Kyle Ashley, actually, if you can get him late, he could 100% be a steal for you, but you got to get him late. Don't overbuy there. Because you really don't know what kind of – they would love – Doug Peterson would love a balanced offense where he runs Travis Etienne. And you saw it early last season where Trevor wasn't putting up these gaudy numbers, but he was playing winning football. Travis Etienne was running the football. Trevor was doing enough to get him in range. They were taking what was there. Trevor wasn't just lighting it up, and it wasn't 4 or 5 touchdown passes from Trevor Lawrence unless that's what they absolutely have to do. So that's why I caution there, because I do think Etienne's going to be in line for a good season. As we've seen at this point, Travis is going to get you a 1,000-yard year, plus some big runs here and there. He fell off last year, but he was on a hot streak at the one point in the middle of the season. So there's my fantasy football segment for the day.
Yeah, Etienne's a great pick. Trevor, I'm just cautious on Trevor because from the last time we saw him, he wasn't comfortable on his offensive line. You take the injury out, I just don't think he had that confidence in the guys who were blocking for him. You bring 4 of those guys back,
right.
You know, were injuries the big thing. So I'm looking forward to this Miami game just to see how those guys gel. We saw it preseason. I mean, they didn't play together an entire chunk of time. I mean, very, very small sample size of those 5 guys on the line who are blocking for Trevor. So curious to see how they do on Sunday against Miami, blocked for Trevor. I do think we'll see more confident Trevor. He's looked good in training camp. He's looked good in games. I think having Mac Jones behind him pushes him a little bit more than CJ did. And I do think it's going to be it has to be, to me, really a step forward year for Trevor.
All right, so this is game week. This is the last time to make any sort of pre-games played. Before you've seen it, sight unseen, thoughts about the Jaguars roster, Jaguars season as a whole. Going in to training camp and going after the schedule thing, I think I had them at 12-5. I'm going to stay there.
Okay.
I still feel pretty good. I think this Jaguars defense is going to be good. I really do. I am also a firm believer that sometimes coordinator changes can make drastic differences out there on the field because people just don't know what they're going to do with the pieces. Look at the Baltimore Ravens a year ago. New offensive and defensive coordinator. All of a sudden, they were running the table. We're that close to the Super Bowl. I think those things matter. I am a firm believer in that. I think Ryan Nielsen can be the difference on the defense. The offense, we're going to see. Look, honestly, I think Trevor's health is big. I really like this wide receiver group. I like it better than what they had last year. Christian Kirk's back healthy. I like the addition of Gabe Davis. I think Brian Thomas Jr. Has plenty of room to get better, but I think the floor of what he is right now opens up this offense in a different way from what they've had in a long time. Right now, he's a big guy that's fast that you can say run that way. I think he can do more things than that, but like the absolute basement floor is he's a guy who defenses have to respect. Could catch one over your head at any given moment.
And we didn't see a lot of catches from him in the preseason, but we saw what he can do taking the top off that defense.
And that's what they need. Because they haven't had it.
They've lacked that,
They were trying to get a guy like Zay Jones to be that, but that's not Zay's game. That's not who he was. That's not who he's ever been, not even in college. But that is who Brian Thomas Jr. is. So defenses now have to respect that. And I think that puts them in a place where they have these different pieces that add verticality to the offense because Brian Thomas Jr. is this deep threat. Gabe Davis is averaging over 15 yards per catch in his career. Can he find some consistency from game to game in Jacksonville? We'll see. But he's a big target who I think is going to be able to be a part of this offense. You tack on some things. I like the pieces. I do. I like the pieces. I like the symmetry that are there on the Jaguars offense. The offensive line concerns me, but I'm still at 12 wins. I'm at 12 wins for them. I know you're not.
I'm not as optimistic.
I'm there.
I'm not as optimistic. I do think they will be better than last year. I think they'll be more consistent. I hope the offensive line issues that we saw last year were all injury related. I'm knocking on acrylic here, no wood around.
They weren't.
But they weren't all injury. I know. Even before the year they went to the AFC divisional round. You had Walker Little in there for Cam. Cam was out with a knee injury. You had Jawan Taylor on the other side. Not a good offensive line. You were an average offensive line at your very peak. Last year, I mean, I think PFF had them graded in the mid to lower 20s that AFC divisional year.
Yes.
Last year, they ranked like 28th in pass block. I mean, it was bad. They were bad. And they brought back the same guys this year. So if you can get to that offensive consistency on the line, if you can stay healthy, if the Mitch Morse addition is the key that unlocks the Trevor potential, the offense potential, if that is the key, you can get into that 15 to 20 range in terms of consistency in the offensive line. That was a missing ingredient last year. They did not get blown out in a lot of these games. A lot of these games were because you could not run the ball in goal line situations, in 2-yard situations. You've got to get better. So for me, I'm saying 10-7.
Okay.
I think I said that was my initial pick. I'm staying with that. I think that'll be enough to get them in the playoffs.
That's not, I mean, look, both of us think postseason. I mean, that's not far from where I'm at.
2 games off.
Here's my thought on Mitch Morse. I think he is the offense's version of Ronald Darby. They're not going to be superstars. He's not going to wake up one day and be Jason Kelsey. He's just not. But what he does represent is less variance. I mean, think about this. Luke Fortner has started for the Jaguars since he was a rookie. how many plays per game? I mean, not necessarily plays per game, but how many times do you remember Fortner all of a sudden being 5 yards in the backfield or something bad, that variance?
Yeah.
And that's not shots at Luke. That happens with young players. It's part of the reason why you go with a Ronald Darby. You might love Jarian Jones, you might love DeAndre Prince, but they're going to take those rookie lumps along the way. Same thing, Mason Smith, second-round pick, probably not going to play a whole lot early in the season because they don't have to, but because you don't know what you're going to get from that guy when you put him on the field day one.
Yeah. And
you're going to get that variance.
It's the Eric Armstead, why you get that veteran guy.
Trent
and Doug spoke specifically about they've been in the Super Bowl. They've been in those locker rooms. And are you expecting to get a Super Bowl Eric Armstead version? No, he's getting older. He's coming off a knee injury, knee surgery. But the ability that he brings in those 30 snaps a game he gives you and that experience that he gives on to Josh or Devon or Trayvon, that's what you get a guy like that. You're saying the same thing with Mitch.
Yes, I think he represents a level of consistency. You know what you're going to get from Mitch on every play in and play out, as opposed to that variance. And you don't know with Luke Fortner. For instance, Luke Fortner on the Q-base sneak up in Tennessee at the end of the year. That was a variance play where all of a sudden it went bad. It went south for him. The dude's going the wrong way. I mean, it's all over the place. And that's what that represents. It's like rookie corners. Sometimes they'll lock up a guy and then boom, all of a sudden they get beat 60 yards down the field. Ronald Darby's not going to do that. He represents consistency. He knows where he's going to be. He knows how to handle it. Mitch Morris, to me, is the same thing. And to your point with Eric Armstead, look, they don't need him to be the superstar. You got Josh and Trayvon to do that. The idea is that those guys are your Superman, your Batman, and Eric Armstead's just some other, I think what I said, Aquaman last time. Whatever, you know, however you want to put it together. And same thing on the offensive line. You hope that Anton's going to take another step forward. You're hoping that Ezra Cleveland's going to be healthy to help you out. You hope that Brandon Sheriff can get back to a resemblance of what he has been in his career. And then Mitch represents this this consistency, this level of consistency. So that way, they don't have those plays that are blown up just because of a missed assignment.
Yeah, and I'm worried at 1:17 on Sunday afternoon when we're looking at that game and you see them try to convert a 3rd and 2 and Travis gets stuffed for a 3-yard loss. That's what I'm worried about, because we look and you cannot address, we talked to Trent and Doug before, you cannot address every deficiency on your roster in one offseason. You can't do it. It's not with the salary cap, draft, you just cannot. You have to pick and choose your battles. Did they upgrade at receiver between Gabe and Calvin Ridley? Probably not. I think Calvin's probably a little bit more. I mean, Gabe's never had more than 45 catches in a season. Did you downgrade? I think BTJ is probably better than an upgrade over Zay Jones, because Zay couldn't stay on the field last year. He was injured. So is Devin Duvernay better than Jamal Agnew? I think so. Christian Kirk is healthy. So I do think you got better in increments. Did you address the offensive line? The glaring weakness last year was Luke Fortner. I think you addressed it with Mitch Morris. But the rest of the line, did you improve there at all?
You want Anton year 2?
You didn't in the draft with Javon Foster. You hope in Anton, the ascension we saw last year, he's going to be better. You know what you get with Cam. You know what you get with Walker. You're kind of those guys who they are at this point.
You really don't know what you're getting from, and maybe the hope is that Ezra in the building for you, because he wasn't here this time last year. And then by the time they got him, he got hurt relatively quickly. So the hope is that a healthy Ezra Cleveland is a difference maker there too.
I'm with you though on the defensive side of the ball. I do think Ryan Nielsen is going to be a big addition. And
I mean, this defensive line room. I mean, like Mason Smith again, 2nd-round pick, and he was a highly touted guy out of LSU, big body guy who's got some chops, and I don't know that he's going to be in the rotation to start the year. Like that. When's the last time that you can think of the Jaguars had something like that, a 2nd-round pick that they were just like, I mean, outside of Brenton Strange. But outside of a situation like that, most of the time these 2nd-round picks are expected to walk in and play immediately. And Mason Smith's a guy who's going to have to fight for every rep in the rotation. And I think that says something to the depth of that defensive line group. You got Josh and Trayvon on the edges. Behind them, so there's something to be desired. But the interior of that defensive line, with Devon healthy, you got Roy Robertson-Harris, who's a guy who's still here, veteran guy. You got Eric Armstead, who's going to give you some rotation along that defensive line. You got Mason Smith. Shucks, they got Jordan Jefferson, who they also brought in. I mean, and they kept Jeremiah Ledbetter, who can also give you some inside-outside versatility there. guy who's won a Super Bowl. You know what you're going to get. They represent, I mean, I think a lot of the decisions on this roster were based on, I want to know what I'm going to get when this guy steps on the field. Jeremiah Ledbetter is a guy that play in and play out, you know what you're going to get when you put him out on the field.
I agree. I'm with you on the defensive line. And talking to Trayvon, I had an interview with him and asked him about what he likes about Ryan Nielsen's defense. Do you like it? The change in coordinators, the change really in the defensive system. And he says, I like being able to put my hand in the dirt.
Yep.
He said, I thought it was funny. He says, there are receivers now that are pretty darn fast. There are tight ends that are pretty darn fast. So having a guy like me out there covering one of those guys, probably not the best use of my skill set. So I think with Trayvon being able to put his hand in the dirt, Josh being able to put his hand in the dirt. Those guys are big and physical, but Trayvon against Brandon Ayuk or somebody like that, that's not a good coverage kind of matchup. And Trayvon's like, these receivers are big and fast now. I don't want to be running against those guys down the field. So I think that makes sense. I think Trayvon and Josh not asked to cover tight ends or receivers like they have been in the past. I think that's going to unlock that. I'm with you. I think defensive line across the front, the deepest, the best on the team. And Devon Hamilton coming back, I think, is massive for that line. Yeah,
look, and honestly, you know what? That simplifies the game because you take your two best guys and you let them do their best traits. Trayvon's a fantastic run defender and is getting better as a pass rusher. Josh Hines-Allen, let him get after the quarterback. Enough said. You do it there. All right, so we've pretty much wrapped up this podcast at this point. That means we'll do one more later on this week and talk about the Dolphins game a little bit more specifically. But we got a couple minutes left before we got to wrap it up because of time constraints in the studio right now. As we wrap it up, your preseason MVP, who's going to be the Jaguars MVP for the year when the season's done?
Ooh, man, that's tough.
There you go. Not Trevor. Can't be Trevor.
Both sides of the ball, we talking?
Do offensive and defensive. Not Trevor Lawrence.
I'm going to say.
Not named Trevor Lawrence.
I'm going to say, man, this is tough. Put me on the spot. I'm going to go with Josh Hines-Allen. He was my guy last year. I was saying he would have a career year. He ended up having one. I'm going to say he's going to be more motivated. I think he's going to thrive in Ryan Nielsen's defense. I'm going to say him on the defensive side of the ball, runner-up. Is going to be, I would say Darnell Savage, but I would say runner-up to me is Tyson Campbell. He's got a lot to prove. Big contract. So JHA for me, number 41, Tyson Campbell would be my runner-up. Offensively, oh, man, I'm going to say I'm going to have to go with ETN. I think he's been the most consistent in the offense. And obviously quarterback would be the MVP, but I'm going to say Travis. He's been consistent when he's not been injured. His first year, you wash that off the board. Travis has been the most consistent thing in this offense in his time here. He's going into year 4. They picked up his 5th-year option, so he will be back. I think he's going to have a good year. My backup, my honorable mention, offensive MVP. I'm going to say Evan.
Evan Ingram? Okay. All right, defense, I'm going to go Andre Cisco.
Okay.
Contract year for him. I think this new defensive scheme is going to allow him to play to his strengths. I think he's going to have a big season. And he's motivated to do so because there's a payday on the way for him.
There is.
So give me Andre Cisco as my defensive MVP. My offensive guy, this one's a little bit more difficult for me, especially I'm not gonna go ETN since he went with ETN. So I'm gonna go Christian Kirk.
Okay.
Look, I think that Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. are gonna open up the field a lot for the likes of Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk to do what they do best. So I think Christian Kirk's gonna be on his way to another 1,000-yard season. And a nice season here in Jacksonville, and I think he's going to lead the team in receiving. Okay. So I'll go Christian Kirk on offense, and I'm going to go Andre Cisco on defense.
All right, not bad, not bad. I can see it. I'm looking forward to seeing Darnell Savage in this defense. Doug has raved about him in camp, and it's just going to be interesting to see. He's to me, he's like that Cisco. He's like almost a linebacker too. He's just an exciting player to watch to me.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of the News4JAGs podcast. Hey, we're going to be making our picks for the entire season over on News4JAGs.com. We do this every week anyway, but we're actually going to invite you to go make your picks with us as well. So you'll be able to find that over on News4JAGs.com if you click on that sports page. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us here on this News4JAGs podcast, and we'll see you next time.